Okay. You'll see in front of her. You will walk away from that door after agreeing. Oh, okay. So, just go to this. I know there are things that we don't see.
This is right. Even Tuesday, some candidates showed up. One of the candidates' wife showed up. So that put an extra person in the audience. Questions were drafted for the confirmation.
So we did, and Leanne was there. First, so there's three of them. Right. That's what I hear election cycle. But yeah,
No, you can't see it because it's too small, because on my phone. Okay. That one, but I like this other one. I didn't like that one. I didn't like that one. It was too bad. Okay. Because it's good. On the cover of the tree, it's fine. Church. Because we're going to use the letter here too. Okay, so I'm going to use that font without all the words. Okay. But that was the suggestion. Coming from us. Okay.
What is that? Fingerprint something?
No, that's jewels. I put some jewels in there.
Oh, that's like gems before the key.
That's what I'm saying. But I just told her, use your imagination. Okay. So I'm waiting to hear from the guy. See, I like that. I said, I gave him that. I gave him that. But I just wanted to say that.
I like that font.
You can't see that because all the red. She'll have to take that. Yeah, that's, like smoke coming out. She's so,
I wonder what that font is. But it's really hard.
it's hard to read. Yeah.
Because you can't see the words.
You put that on a shirt, or, on a poster, you can't really see it. Basically, that's a piece. That looks like that's that script. Which, when I get ready to do letterhead, I put out address.
That font is different.
So we might be starting here in just a minute. Mark Lucas has
You
arrived,
can't read
so
it. See what I'm saying? It's hard to
it
read.
looks like it's only going to be 3 days.
So she did what I asked her to do. The guy, he was trying to find out, are you accepting the fight before he even started doing it? But that ain't what that's not what he said. Message. Okay. He was lower than she was. What's it for discount? $60.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
$240 off of that $300.
Wow. You should get right on.
But she was sold. Yeah, you're probably not.
No one's watching, so you're
Yes, sir, you're probably not.
Oh, she left.
Mm-hmm. How come you didn't know? You know I talk. You my voice too. Remember?
It's smoke. You gonna cut it
Yeah,
off?
I thought he was That's right, that's right. Yeah. That was back in the days when we were virtually eliminated. Now there's hardly anybody come in. We only have more people come in now. So many people come in for recording sessions, basically, he said. Who was it? About 3 weeks ago? Yeah, I guess it was. Lisa Darby was forced to read. Well, that was, she wanted to be on, she wanted to talk about the series of conversations, the one concern with our interest for the Central Workforce Innovations. And she wanted to talk about that. So I couldn't not let her come in and talk. So I just had to let people know, said, listen, we're going to have somebody in the building, so be sure to let them in, don't call ahead, because the door's locked and let them call ahead. So,
Over at the legislature.
yeah, you just have to be sure it's closed out.
You know, staff is not
It's,
they're coming back.
oh yeah, very slowly, very slowly, we have more people back here. So.
Yeah. But they need to know more crazy.
Yeah, I know, yeah, that's the important, that's the annoying thing. Yeah.
The other candidates are told.
Yes.
Okay, you can't campaign.
Oh, you can't campaign?
That's right.
Oh.
You can do that on the other side. No, they can keep it. They'll just put it away. Okay. You can put it afterwards. Yeah, you can do it
Yeah, roughly, I would say 17 to 20 questions. Back in here, we'll go ahead and draw numbers. Got a number
Everybody's
to
fuzzy.
determine
The other classes all for existence. I mean,
answer the first question, closing statements, as well
I
as
put the seers on so I can see things when it's time to read.
Drawing places for things
I know where you're going. Hour 69. Hey, I get them all.
All right, numbers here, so whoever wants to reach their hand in.
Mark still. I appreciate
Mark, you'll be all the way down there. You'll be there, and no, Mike, Ben, you right here, and no, you're not all the way down there by yourself.
I'm feeling old.
Sorry.
Okay, so with that, Ben, like I said, you'll each have 60 seconds for your opening statements. With 3 candidates, we'll be doing 60 seconds for the answers. We'll have timekeepers right here in the front row, and then we'll have 30 seconds at the end of the evening for the closing statements. Plan right now, based on whatever time we start for the next few minutes, is to go as close to an hour as possible. And so we will get through as many questions in that hour as we can get through. So I know that if there's audience questions for the evening, there's going to be lead questions and media panel questions that we won't get through every question that everybody wants to get through. Realistically, we'll probably be getting through roughly 15 to 20. The sweet spot seems to be about 17 questions for you. So, yes.
I'm gonna turn the
Yep,
camera
Alex is going to be
on.
monitoring the mic feed over there. So,
Staying here though.
is that it?
We're not gonna be standing.
Correct. Yep, all three of you are staying in your seats. Go ahead and get up.
Check, check, check,
Go ahead, you got it.
check, check.
I got him muted right now, so.
Okay. Yeah, just unmute it real quick.
I'm just saying.
Oh, you want to get
We should check them before we start.
Yeah, he's done.
Go ahead.
Check.
Oh, you already checked.
Okay.
Tom,
Yes.
Are you allowing 1 minute for each question?
Yep, 1 minute. So we'll have, I guess I'll explain to the audience as well. We will go with a 60-second open, we'll have a 30-second close, and then we'll have 60 seconds for the answering portion for each question. Through the course of the evening, then we've drawn numbers, and then we will go in order of the numbers for the statements. So for the open, it's going to be Mark first, followed by Mark, followed by Ben. And then in reverse order for the closing statement, Ben, you'll actually go first. Mark, you'll go second. And then Martin, you'll go last for the closing statements. And a couple of you have been here for all of this so far, so we'll have the media panel asking questions, and then we'll come back and I'll ask a couple of questions. We'll go back to the media panel, and we'll go back and forth on that. So, we good to go? Tape's rolling? Okay, cool. Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening for the U.S. House of Representatives District 1 Republican primary debate. I'm Tom Maloney. I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. Joining us are Martin Lucas, Mark Leyva, and Ben-Ruiz. Blair Milo, Jennifer Ruth Green, Aaron Storr, and Nicholas Pappas were invited to attend this evening's debate, but were not able to make it. We have drawn numbers this evening for candidates in terms of the open and the close, and with that, Martin Lucas is drawn first, and so you have 60 seconds, Martin, for your opening statement.
Thank you for coming out. My name is Martin Lucas. I'm running for Congress. I believe in term limits. I'm not a career politician. I believe that the politician should be a lifetime ban of himself and his family members from becoming lobbyists. They should not have pensions. I'm not in this for any personal financial gain. There's too much money in politics. If you want to donate money, donate it to the poor and to charities and people who need it, not to politicians. Politicians spend too much of other people's money. We are presently $30 trillion in debt. To put that in perspective, if you went back in time 30 trillion seconds, you would go back 950,000 years. Abraham Lincoln said, "The government is of the people, by the people, for the people." I'm spelling by, B-Y. Unfortunately, many of the career politicians in Washington are spelling it B-U-Y. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leyva, you have 60 seconds for your opening statement.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Mark Leyva. I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives, covers Lake County, Porter County, and I'm part of Michigan City. I am a former steel worker. I'm also a former union carpenter, self-employed. I just want to say that this is an election like no others. We have, in Washington, we have a serious problem. We're fighting the rhinos, we're fighting the establishment from both parties that are not doing us well. My personal quote is, "Politics benefits the few, good government benefits all." And all I could say is I'm an America First candidate, and we need to reverse our policies back to the Trump policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ben, you have 60 seconds for your opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ben-Ruiz. I'm also an American First MAGA candidate for Indiana's 1st Congressional District. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a sole proprietor owning my own business in marketing and advertising. I live right here in the local community of East Chicago, in between Hammond and Whiting. One of the best things about me you'll see and find is that I am also a candidate for pro-life term limits and terminating corporate lobbying in Congress. I would like to continue to focus on national constitutional carry as well as immigration reform and tax reform, eliminating IRS and creating a flat tax rate for all Americans. The limit to congressional term limits is most important as well. It's something that has gone on for far too long. We don't need establishment candidates to continue.
Thank you. All right, and answering on the first question is going to be Mark, and we'll start off here. In your own words, please explain what the House of Representatives does.
The House of Representatives is the body that actually is responsible not only to create and amend the Constitution or create new laws, but they're the only body to tax or raise taxes on the people, or in any case, they're the only body to increase taxes. But basically, they pass the legislation that either helps create jobs or helps not create jobs, as far as being less restrictive and less taxes. So all I can tell you, they could do good if they want to, like the Trump policies, or they could do bad like the Biden policies. And that's it.
Thank you. Ben, you have 60 seconds.
Essentially, it is the legislative branch of the United States government, which is a constitutional republic for the people, by the people, we the people. Their duties are to help get legislation passed and then forward it over to the Senate for final approval, which then, once it would be approved, it would move on to the president to either be signed into law or vetoed by the president and sent back to Congress in order for them to revise it and still pass it.
Thank you. Martin.
Well, just to add on to what they said, it is the legislative branch. They've answered the question well. The other thing, though, is that they need to listen. That's also part of their job, to listen to what the people. They're supposed to be public servants, yet it seems like Washington is disconnected from the voters. It's more about prestige and power and perks, and that goes back to, again, why I'm in favor of term limits.
Thank you. We'll go to the media panel next, and joining us in the media panel this evening are Natasha Brown from IUN, as well as a member of the League of Women Voters of the Calumet area, and Chris Nolte from Lakeshore Public Radio. Natasha, will begin with your first question. And answering, I should note, answering first will be Ben.
Good evening, and just some follow-up regarding your introductions. What does the phrase "Make America Great Again" mean to you?
It means bringing America back to a functioning society for each and every American, from one side of the nation to the other, regardless of race, gender, ethnic background, diversity, but equally as important, placing every American before any foreign power, any corporate power, and making sure that we represent the American people as a whole.
Thank you. Martin.
The United States is based on democracy and capitalism. And those two institutions, when they're combined, are the greatest forces in the history of the world. It can do the most good for the most people for the longest amount of time. Those two institutions are not as strong as they should be today, and much of that has to do with what's going on in Washington. Just ask people, what do you think of politicians? You won't get positive answers. They'll say they're self-serving, all talk, no action, and they're all the same. That's why I continue to stress, I'm not a career politician. I am passionate, and why I entered this race was for term limits to break that strangleholds that the incumbents have. People don't like the politicians, yet the incumbents are reelected at over a 90% rate. Why is that? It's because of money. It seems like the people who spend the most money win. That's not what democracy should be about. It should be about the people, and it should be about your platform.
Thank you. And Mark?
Making America great. Well, first of all, that means Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, should be passing legislation that benefits all, just like my quote. Politics benefits only the few, but good government benefits all. And there are policies that work 100% of the time, and they have been done by different presidents. JFK cut the tax cuts across the board, Reagan, and then we had Donald Trump really show us what America could look like. And his policies gave everybody good benefits, no matter what color of the skin they had. And that's what we're looking for, good legislation for all.
Thank you. I've actually got a follow-up that before we get to you, Chris, for the next question. So answering first on this one is going to be Martin. Candidates from across the country are seeking the approval and support of former President Donald Trump. Have you actively sought the endorsement from the former president, or are you declining to seek his endorsement?
If Donald Trump wants to endorse me, I would accept it wholeheartedly as a Republican, yes. But he has not reached out to me yet, so no, he has not. But definitely, I believe in a Republican policy. That's why I am a Republican. I believe in smaller government, less regulation on businesses, pro-life, school choice, etc. But that really doesn't differentiate me from the other candidates on the ballot. We all believe in the Republican platform.
Okay. Mark?
Yes, I am a constitutional conservative Republican. And in Washington, that's the big difference. The Constitution and what it's designed to do, and what powers we have and what powers we don't. And that's the biggest problem we do have. And I just want to say that as long as Donald Trump would give me an opportunity for an endorsement, I would be wholeheartedly willing 100% to take it, because he is cleaning out what they call the rhinos in Washington, Republicans in name only. That's it.
Thank you. Ben?
I haven't actively sought the endorsement of President Donald J. Trump. However, if he were to endorse me, I would accept it wholeheartedly because of a lot of the great policies that he instilled during his term as president that actually benefited Americans from all walks of life, and also put us on the foreign international stage as once again a strength and power in the international community. So I definitely would accept it because what he's done for the country in lowering the crime rate and increasing job opportunities for minorities definitely went a long way.
Thank you. Going to the media panel, Chris Nolte, and answering first will be Mark.
Good evening. If you should be elected to Congress, what would be your top 3 priorities for the 1st Congressional District and the constituency you would serve?
What would be my 3 top? All I can tell you is, I can only tell you that we need to protect our borders, pass legislation that's constitutional, cut the taxes to get people back together and definitely get this pipeline back online so that we could become oil independent again, which is a national security issue. And now it's an issue for every homeowner, every person filling their gas tanks, every person going grocery shopping, and we can't afford it anymore. We need to get back to what works.
Ben.
Holding all those accountable for the current state of affairs in the United States of America and against our American people, holding Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Schumer, and of course including Dr. Fauci responsible for a lot of the chaos that has ensued and the unconstitutional and precedent mandates passed, not only throughout the United States of America, but especially mandates that directly affected every minority community throughout the country. So that would be my top priority. My second priority would be to pass a repeal of all of the executive orders that actually cut our American energy independence and kept us on foreign oil. The third would pass bill reform so that we could vote on one bill at a time.
Thank you. Martin.
I would want to eliminate baseline budgeting. How that works is every program automatically gets an increase, regardless, every program. So what happens is, let's say you already spent $1 billion from last year, they'll give you $1 billion, $100 million, or whatever the number is. And let's say you only spend $80 million out of that 100. The politician will get up and say he has cut the budget by $20 million, which is ridiculous. He's actually increased it by $80 million. So you have to get rid of baseline budgeting. Again, the country is $30 trillion in debt. Also, as I've repeated, term limits, I want term limits, and I would want that politicians are banned from becoming lobbyists. Those would be the three.
Thank you. And a follow-up to that with regards to a comment that you had made in terms of the pipeline, Mark. But answering first on this question will be Ben. Sorry, losing my place here. What are your views on the Russian war on Ukraine, and do you support American arms being delivered to Ukraine? And I'll add the caveat to that question as well. That includes monies being delivered to Ukraine as well from America.
Well, at this very moment, it is a shame of what's going on in the war and all affecting millions of Ukrainian citizens, but also affecting millions of Russian citizens. I think it's highly unfair, and I think that the plausibility of the war to begin with was the fault of the Biden administrations and their foreign, their foreign process, which failed miserably. We started focusing on woke policies instead of on good foreign policy measures that made us a power in the world that preempted wars such as going on. As far as the monies, the arms, I would be careful with the shipment of arms because we've all seen what happened in Afghanistan. As far as monies, I would absolutely vouch for money to support Ukrainians, although I would like to have a yield and interest payments made back so that we're making money.
Thank you. Martin.
I would continue to support arms and if more sophisticated, if that's what's needed to stop the Russians, I would be in favor of that. I am much more in favor, though, of economic sanctions. The world is set up that way, so if a country does just what the Russians did, that they would pay wholeheartedly at home with the people through their economy. If Putin is looking to create an empire, strangle him so he's all by himself with the country without the rest of the world. That's the way the Russian people will feel it, unlike the Ukrainians who are being brutally, savagely murdered. It's absolutely horrendous to see that happen.
Thank you. And Mark.
Well, first of all, the biggest part of it is information, correct information, all right? We're not getting, the news here in the United States is lying to the American people. And it's Mr. Putin that went in and took out all the biolabs that the United States said they did not have, and then was proven with the information that they finally admitted they had biolabs. Ukraine is the money laundering capital of the world, okay? That's where they got all their money. The Bidens, the Pelosi's kid, the Romney's kid, all them, all right? They took the money. There's also child trafficking. There's also, there's all kinds of stuff going on that the Russians are actually trying to make it a better living. And the Azov Nazis are the ones that are killing a lot of the Ukrainians.
Thank you. We should note that biolabs, as originally reported on from Ukraine, were not the original source of the COVID-19 virus as originally reported. So I just want to make sure that that is known as well. We're going to go back to the media panel now for Natasha, and answering first will be Mark.
Okay. Federal student loan debt has plagued many borrowers, particularly young borrowers, and held back financial growth opportunities such as buying houses and starting families. So recently, Invested noted that the average Indiana borrower has $31,000 in student loan debt. What are your views on eliminating student loan debt?
I am against elimination of student debt. If the government wants to help them out, then the government could obtain the loans and make them long-term loans at very low to zero interest. But you do not get the government paying off decisions that you've made. I mean, it's your individual financial responsibilities, decisions you've made, and it isn't fair to those that actually did it the right way and paid off the loan. So I am totally against the government paying off loans like that. Part of it too is a $30 trillion debt that I keep mentioning also.
Thank you. Mark.
I too agree with not letting the government pay off the loans. First of all, the government would not have got involved with the loans if they would have let the private sector keep the loan process in the private sector, okay? Again, it's just a way that government uses to pick and choose and create educational ways of getting people to pay for school. But the bottom line is we need to teach children, adults, whatever it is, that they are self-responsible and they have to pay them off just like anybody else. And that's just part of life. And there's like Martin said, there's a lot of people that have already paid off their loans. And I don't think the government's gonna give their money back.
Thank you. Ben.
I also agree that when individuals decide that they want to go to extended education, that it's ultimately up to them to provide and maintain that secondary educational degree, especially when you're going to university for gender studies or social economic policies, and really that's going to not amount to a whole lot of different types of works. But what I would suggest is that we also take an appropriate moment of time to actually give the students an alternative to just going to college, but give them an alternative to seeking other areas of opportunity, such as construction and anything that has to do with labor and the labor workforce, which can be generous.
Thank you. Go back to the media panel. Chris, and answering first will be Mark.
Thank you. Do you think that Northwest Indiana is economically healthy and successful? And if not, and elected to Congress, what would you do to change that?
Well, first of all, answering that question honestly, and as they would say, the truth is the truth, is Washington has a job in Washington as congressman to do our jobs based on the Constitution, okay? And are there what we call a lot of pork barrel projects that do come back? Sure there are. We need to get rid of more. But what we need to do is clean up the politicians here in Northwest Indiana and start getting a lot more honest, transparent politicians and people asking for forensic audits to find out who do we need to make this place better. That's all I can say, because yes, we have a diamond in the rough here in Northwest Indiana, and I would like to be part of reforming it to much better policy.
Thank you. Ben.
In terms of community, we have a lot of improvement to do. I am one politician that sees the biggest diamond in the rough, and that's Gary, Indiana. I would like to see it successfully rebuilt in residential, commercial, and industrial. I think there's ample opportunity there, and I would completely support Northwest Indiana bringing the hub, making Gary the same city that it was back in the 1940s, and definitely economically independent and taking charge of the Northwest Indiana corridor from Hammond all the way to LaPorte. Definitely, I see them as leaders in the community, and I would fight for definitely benefits for our communities.
Thank you. Mark.
I would agree with what Ben said there wholeheartedly. I also think as a congressperson, you should be listening to the people. It shouldn't be Washington dictating down, here's what we're gonna do to you. So you should listen to the people, the businesses, the charities, even the government officials, to make sure we're all on the same page. What do they need from Washington? How could Washington, help them accordingly?
Thank you. That was concise. Up next, Ben will be answering first on this one. Recently, Governor Holcomb said he would not legalize marijuana in Indiana and would only follow the federal law for legalization. What are your views on the decriminalization of marijuana?
From the standpoint of the federal level, I would be for reducing, because as we all know, on a federal level, marijuana actually outweighs cocaine, unfortunately. However, as far as in communities, I don't think it should be fully legalized. I think medical marijuana would be fine. But as far as making it completely publicly available, no, I would not be for that. I would completely be against that, because then that would lead our children to being susceptible into, obviously, drug use. And that's definitely what we're trying to provide in the low-income communities. We already have enough issues as they are, and we've had issues from crack cocaine, and we definitely don't need any more issues from any other drug use in the communities.
Thank you. Martin.
I would be in favor of it. I believe in individual rights, individual freedoms. I think it could also be a revenue generator for the state, and it also would save money for the amount of costs that the police force and the criminal system is using for people who are caught with marijuana. I would be in favor of legalizing it.
And Mark.
Yes. First of all, on the federal level, I do not believe in legalizing marijuana. I do believe that there's a need for medical marijuana, and I'd like to see that possible. But as far as all these other states, we haven't seen where it has benefited the community just because they legalized it. Let's take a look at Chicago, okay? I don't see any great things happening in Chicago because they legalized it. Everything's still crime high and all kinds of problems. I don't see the benefits. And until you do something at a federal level, you also have a tremendous problem with the owners of these businesses that have a way of trying to keep and transfer their profits, daily profits, because of
Thank
the
you.
laws.
That's your time. Thank you. Up first for this question is going to be Martin. Almost 9% of Hoosiers are uninsured. That's according to AmericanHealthRankings.org. Would you be in favor of the creation of a single taxpayer healthcare system like Medicare for all, or would you favor leaving the current healthcare system unchanged?
Well, before I answer that question, the way I answered marijuana, I want to point it out, I am not a marijuana user. I want to make that point clear. As far as answering the question, I do believe that you have to have the healthcare system that supports those that have pre-existing conditions. So I would not want to eliminate Obamacare or anything like that. I would want that to remain, that people who have pre-existing conditions are covered under healthcare.
Mark.
Okay, well, it's a simple choice, simple answer. We saw what happened when the government got involved with healthcare and created Obamacare. It increased your premiums anywhere for 4 times or higher. So people that were families that have $500 monthly policies, have $1,200, $1,500 policies, and then have a lot higher deductibles. So it is hurting. When the government gets involved with healthcare, it's bad. The free market is the best choice, and I believe in just giving more opportunity to the free market policies, and we definitely have to get rid of the government involved. And you have to also remember that the government is involved with veterans care and so on, and it's a large part that is needs to be taken care of.
Thank you. Ben.
Thank you. When you socialize healthcare, it gives room for exploitation of the benefits. And what I mean by that is many American citizens don't tend to see those benefits. As Mark Leyva mentioned, Obamacare, when Obamacare came, I automatically was told that I would be able to keep my provider. That was not true. My provider was eliminated from my plan. My plan increased about 3 or 4 folds of what my standard pay was. What I am in favor is of freedom of choice of healthcare, which would create a competition, which would also lower the pricing and give better opportunities and better options to all citizens, including options that would allow you to go to any provider outside of your state, outside of your area.
Thank you. We'll go back to the media panel, and Natasha answering first will be Mark.
Recently, states such as Texas voted to remove protections for women seeking abortions. Would you vote to criminalize abortion in the United States? Why or why not?
Well, I think what you're talking about is the legislation that was trying to allow fetuses to be born and 28 days later a decision to abort them. And that is a criminal in itself, crime in itself. So I put it this way, I'm not in favor of abortion factories, and I don't think our federal dollars should pay for any of it, okay, at all. At least I don't want my federal dollars to be paid for abortions. So I just, all I can say is I think the question you gave was a little vague, but I answered it based on what I think the legislation you were talking about. It's a crime.
Thank you. Ben.
Hot topic, abortion. It's always been passed around as woman's choice, woman's right. So was at the time of conception. It was a choice between 2 consenting adults that had nothing to do with the government, and so therefore the government should be kept out of it. I am against abortion because it is the legalization of murder against the unborn children, especially in minority communities such as Black communities and Hispanic communities throughout the entire country. It is a shame that we have allowed it to go on in the form of pro-choice, because those are innocent lives and their lives matter. Regardless of anything, it is ungodly. It is immoral and should not be sustained any longer. Sorry.
Thank you. Martin.
I am pro-life, with the only exceptions would be rape, incest, and if the mother's life was in danger. The two other candidates, I wholeheartedly agree with what they said, especially what Ben had said there. Individuals are making choices, and you should think about those choices and the consequences, and it is a human life you're talking about. So I am pro-life.
We'll go back to the media panel now. For Chris, answering first will be Ben.
What do you think about the current tax rates, and would you support any changes to the Internal Revenue Code?
As far as the current tax rate, I would support a flat rate tax and elimination of the Internal Revenue Service completely altogether. It has failed the American citizens for so long and taken advantage of especially the lower income communities and rural communities by just consistently raising the tax increase while giving big corporations the big tax cuts and incentives that they get in order to continue to get further their businesses. So I am definitely for the elimination of the IRS tax code and just making it a flat rate tax for all.
Thank you. Martin.
And that's a very difficult and complicated question. It's not an easy answer that you can just simply eliminate the IRS. It's much more complex than that. From a tax perspective, obviously, from a Republican standpoint, I do not want to raise taxes. People will talk that businesses are getting tax breaks, tax credits, but you also have to remember many of these large corporations are providing employment for many, many, many employees, and if they're well-paying jobs, we're getting tax revenue off of their employees also. So, again, it's not an easy catch-all answer to say you can just eliminate the IRS accordingly. So, it's a difficult question, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mark.
It's not a difficult question if you know your history. 1913 was the first year that we had a permanent income tax. Prior to 1913, we had a ship war tax, and everybody paid to have the ships built. We talk about the Industrial Revolution, the best part of our life. Well, guess what? There was zero taxation, and all those entrepreneurs were trying to be creating new parts of our life to make better, to be wonderful. So I, too, would love to have a fair tax, which is similar to the flat tax, but 10 times better, okay? And anytime we see, and it's based in history facts, anytime you cut taxes across the board, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we create double the revenue in our revenue sources go to the IRS.
And then if I can ask you as well, please lean closer to the microphone when answering the questions. Thank you, Mark. Next up is, answering first is going to be Martin, and we hear it, jobs, 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 jobs. If elected as representative, what would you do to bring more jobs to Northwest Indiana?
Well, in order to create the jobs, you have to create an environment for the jobs. And when people say, give me a job, I need a job, that's incorrect. You really want the skill set to be employable. That's a big difference. What you'd have to do is it's a partnership between the private sector, education, the higher education, and also the government. And those three have to work together, and without question, though, it's the private sector that is the most important pushing that agenda.
Thank you. Mark?
First of all, small business creates 80% of all jobs in our country. So you gotta make sure to have good jobs available. You need the big government in Washington to get their boots off the necks of the private businessman. You need to have tax cuts. You need to have less restrictions. You need to have empowerment zones. You need all that, and corporate tax is the biggest fake in the world. Most people think if you raise the corporate tax, you're gonna raise money on the businessman. You're not doing that. When you raise the corporate tax, you're raising the tax on everything that you buy. You pay the corporate tax. That's what the American people have to wake up and understand. As far as I'm concerned, if we have the lowest corporate tax, I'll even go to zero. And you know what's gonna happen? Our country will explode with jobs.
Thank you. And Ben.
Focus on entrepreneurship and investment, reinvestment in our communities instead of having them go out to third-party loans. Actually, building a system within the subsidized loans that the federal government usually hands out. They did something similar back in the day when they created all of the light poles for General Electric, GE, believe it, ComEd, Commonwealth Edison. All of these light poles were subsidized by the government, okay, with an incentive that we made. So we made revenue giving these loans out. If we can do the same, we can score a victory, especially in the low-income communities of Northwest Indiana, by building entrepreneurship in communities that are always affected with job loss, such as the recent shutdown of the furnace here in East Chicago.
Thank you. We should actually note that the furnace being shut down in East Chicago didn't cause the loss of jobs. Employees were able to go ahead and be transferred to other portions of the mill.
They were, but in all honesty, there's no more work coming in through that door. That's where the opportunity was lost.
I understand. Thank you. This is going to be a follow-up actually to a question that Chris had asked earlier, as well as something that all three of you have touched on tonight, and I wanted to get some greater clarification on that. And the question is, would you increase or decrease the tax rates on any groups of Americans? And Mark, you'll be answering first.
I say decrease them all across the board. It happened with John F. Kennedy in '62. Happened with Reagan. It happened with Trump. Well, except for they scared him. They didn't let the top 1% get a tax cut. But it works every time. It brings in all kinds of revenue. It gives businesses more money to expand, spend money, hire or expand. And the bottom line is the proof is in the Treasury receipts. So anytime you check a president that cut taxes across the board, you will see that it's double the receipts, okay? And so that's the difference between Republicans doing it in a way that benefits all, and Democrats tax in thinking that's the way to increase revenue. Taxes just suppresses jobs, especially for the middle class and low income.
Thank you. Ben.
I also would cut them all across the board because continuing to raise taxes only leads to mismanaging the funding of the federal government and distribution throughout the states, to the communities, to the localities, and ends up giving us a larger deficit a majority of the time. Anytime you raise taxes, it is not a successful choice, especially for those already hurting in lower income communities, especially in the rural areas where there are less jobs than there would be in city localities. So definitely lowering the tax rate would benefit the communities all across the board, all across America.
Thank you. Mark.
This is a Republican debate, so the answers are going to be the same, where I'm not in favor of raising taxes. I'm in favor of lowering them also. what you have to remember, people will always say, you know, the top 1%, et cetera, we should tax them. I read somewhere, and you could have validated, I don't know the exact numbers, but they said if you took all the money that the top 1% have, everything, it would only pay for Medicare for, I think it was 5 years or something like that. You'd have to double check on those facts.
6 months of government.
Mark says 6 months of government. So it's more of a political phrase to, you know, the top 1%. The United States is built on democracy and capitalism. And a part of capitalism with entrepreneurs, it's risk and reward. And then also, those people that are in the top 1%, they've made your lives much easier, and they've hired many people also.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the media panel now, and Natasha.
Okay, we're gonna go to the topic of constituent services. If elected, what would be your plans to connect with your constituents? It could be an event, where you located, where your office or offices will be located. So any plans about that?
Ben, you'll be going first.
Yes, for so long, for many years, like I said, I've always had my eye out for anywhere from the Gary to Hammond, Indiana area. And I think it would be an ample opportunity and a perfect opportunity to grow, especially a congressional office there to actually help build up on residential, commercial, and industrial businesses there and help grow the community and interact and engage with the lower income community that needs so much help, as well as the rural communities.
Thank you. Martin.
Just the question had to do with how would I be connecting to the public?
Yes, it could be an event or where your offices will be located, either one. How would you connect with your constituents?
Well, being in Washington, D.C., I would always have the email, the website, telephone, direct access to the people. That is key. Washington, there is a present disconnect between Washington and the voters. I mean, with Washington, it can boil down to 5 words. Money, money, and more money. And they've lost connection with the average voter. And I think, again, one of the most important elements or characteristics of an elected official is to listen.
Thank you. Mark.
Well, I would definitely have, I think the standard protocol is 2 offices in the district. Definitely, I think Maryville is probably a prominent one, and maybe one in the eastern side. But most important is trying to have, well, I would say this, I would be home more than I'd be in Washington compared to a lot of politicians that kind of stay in Washington and get tainted, all right? I would like to have more emails from all my constituents just to see how they think. And the other thing is, with today's technology, there's no real reason why we should be going to Washington and we should be voting in our offices with our constituents on the other side of the door.
Thank you. We'll go back to the media panel for Chris.
What are your thoughts about trying to balance on terms of the environment and industrial needs along Lake Michigan in particular, trying to deal with industrial waste that gets into Lake Michigan, and yet be able to keep the industrial sector strong here in Northwest Indiana?
And answering first for that question will be Mark.
Well, first,
I'm sorry, Mark. Sorry, Mark.
Well, second of all, no, you definitely have to have the balance. You need the strong environment, but at the same point, you can't use this environment regulations that it would strangle the business. It is a delicate balance between the two. If you're putting on a spot to choose between the two, I would favor the businesses over the EPA. But it's still, you can't, it's not a free ride. I mean, there's definitely a balance between the two.
Thank you. Mark.
First of all, we have nearly 92 years of failed democratic policy that is responsible, and we have to take ownership of that, okay? So if there is a good chance that one of us candidates could make it all the way, yes, there's time for new plans, new thoughts, and maybe getting an environmentalist or your engineers together and figuring out a plan and try to make it work to handle the problems that the other party has neglected to do anything about.
Thank you. Ben.
I believe that it would be about strong leadership and communication skills with the local and state level leaders, along working hand in hand with the congressional representative of the district, especially the 1st District of Northwest Indiana. And necessarily because we mentioned the word industrial doesn't mean that it's going to be a huge big factory contributing to pollution, and just polluting the area even further than what it is. Most of the time, industrial can also include data centers, which actually emit no pollution, run completely off of energy-based, electricity, clean energy. So that would be one way to actually attract the right industrial corporations to our local and rural, especially our rural communities.
Thank you. Just under the gun. Answering first for this question will be Mark, not Martin. Okay, good there? Okay. What is the number one issue that you've heard from constituents that they want you to be able to work on and possibly fix for Northwest Indiana?
I say the high gas prices and grocery prices, and you're taking the expendable income out of each and every homeowner. Okay, they're tired of the Washington politics, and they're at the point where they want the mean tweets back if they could get $1.87 gas. And I'll tell you what, the problem is when a party does something wrong, there's repercussions. And we had an economy under 4 years of Trump that were running pretty solid at all levels, from national security levels to oil independence levels, and great for the low-income people. Okay, so all of a sudden we have a change of regime, and the Democrats reverse every policy, and that is where we're at right now. So all I could tell you is I gotta stop.
Thank you. Ben.
From Lake to Porter and LaPorte counties, families are suffering because of the increase in pricing, the increase in inflation at historic highs. It's affecting groceries, gas, as Mark stated, is a big issue. People are it's affecting them so much that they're thinking twice about going to that $15 an hour job. Is it even worth it? Or should I allow the government to babysit me and provide for me and my family? It's a decision that many are finding hard to make as the days go and inflation only gets worse because of the deficit spending. We have to stop the spending, and we need to start thinking long-term on how we yield interests on all of the amounts that we've spent so far to get back some interest and put some money back in the piggy bank and in Americans' pockets.
Thank you. Martin.
People are fed up with career politicians. They want it to change. Yet, 90% of the incumbents win. And people want to end that cycle. And the way they're able to win is through, first of all, they have name recognition. They're able to use the U.S. mail with all their campaign brochures, etc., at no cost to them, but taxpayers are paying for that. People just are fed up with the same politicians. So people want term limits. They're tired of all the money in politics. You see these politicians have these extraordinary events that they can rake in with these black tie dinners, over $1 million in one night. Does a self-serving politician ever, for 1 point, say going into that, we're going to give 10% of the money to a charity? So in that case, that politician could give $100,000 to a charity, which is a lot of money, and that poor politician would only get $900,000. People are fed up.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the media panel again here as we begin to wrap up the evening before closing statements. So for Chris and Natasha, one last question each. And Natasha, I believe you're up first.
If elected to this position, what would be the first piece of legislation you would write and introduce to become law?
Answering first will be Ben.
Bill reform to prevent is a measure that to prevent unneeded pork spending. For example, the $1.5 trillion bill that was just recently passed as the Ukraine Emergency Fund. Only $14 billion of that went to Ukraine, while $200 million went to gender research studies and 5,000 other pet projects that had basically no way of getting directly to the American taxpayer. It's a shame. And this is what Mark Leyva mentioned about creating these auditing systems. We need to eliminate and make sure that when we're passing bills, we're passing them on a one-by-one basis, not sticking in other components that deprive Americans of liberty or unfair spending, which at the end of the day, we're gonna have to foot the bill for.
Thank you. Mark.
I would eliminate baseline budgeting, which I talked about earlier. I don't know if I gave the example or not, but that's the equivalent of me saying, you know, I really gained a lot of weight over the past year. I bet you I gained 100 pounds. And I get on the scale, and lo and behold, I gained 80 pounds. And I tell the world, hey, I lost 20 pounds. That's how Washington's finances and politics is going on today. That has to stop. And again, like this all the time, the $30 trillion deficit. Do not forget the $30 trillion. Again, 950,000 years if you were going back 30 trillion seconds. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Mark.
Well, again, bill reform would be good. We shouldn't have any bills any longer than 10 pages long. And we need to make sure that we do it in normal language that the everyday people could read. Because I don't know if you know, most of the legislation that is passed is not passed by the congressman. They're written by the lobbyists on K Street and given to the congressman to co-sponsor or sponsor. And if we had bills that also should be published, 48 hours or even a week ahead, so that the general public could read these bills, we would have a lot better life, a lot better spending, and people could see clearly, very clearly, of the problems.
Thank you. For the final question this evening, we'll go back to the media panel for Chris, and answering first will be Martin.
As we come up to the May 3rd primary election, and the process includes, of course, voter registration, what are your feelings about the current voter registration process? Do you think it needs to be changed? And if so, what would you propose?
I will always favor that you need a photo ID in order to vote. You need a photo ID when you go to the bank, if you go to a liquor store, etc. It should not be an excuse that a person cannot get a photo ID. If voting is that important to you, get the photo ID.
Thank you. Mark.
I totally agree that photo ID is very important. It should be pushed at all polling areas. I believe that some areas are a little lax when it comes to requiring the ID and check, but I know Indiana has a strong policy, and that's good. But I also think that we have a policy that comes with absentee ballots. I strongly think that these ballots, if you're absentees, they should be turned in at least a week before the election. It should be not counted as far as Republican or Democrat, but should be counted as a total number so that that number can't be changed after the 6 o'clock vote when somebody needs more numbers to win an election.
Thank you. Ben.
Thank you very much for this question. Very important question. I also believe in election integrity and voter integrity. I believe that voter IDs are an integral part of the election process. There should be no excuse. And one of the excuses that the Democratic Party has constantly pushed is the issue of racism with voter ID. I also was a citizen of the state of Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth. This is their current ID here, and this is the same ID that they use currently for voter registration. And in many Latin American countries, as well as other international foreign countries, it is the same. So if they can have it where there are people obviously of color, then we can also have it. They're making us out to be incapable of doing anything. And that in itself is racism coming straight out of the Democratic Party.
Thank you. And we've got our closing statements for the evening. They will be going in reverse order of the opening statements. And I want to thank, first off, the Ophelia Steen Center for hosting us for not only tonight's debate, but all of the debates during this primary debate season, as well as the League of Women Voters of the Calumet area, RISE, NWY, and a reminder for people that Election Day is on Tuesday, May 3rd. We at Lakeshore Public Radio will have live coverage of local elections. That being said, for 30 seconds for the closing statement, Ben, you've got the time.
Many people ask me, why me? What's my experience? That's exactly my experience. I have no experience in politics. I'm not a politician. I'm a husband, I'm a father. I have many children that I've raised and I am currently raising. Send someone from the people to represent your voice instead of the politicians that have made promises after promises and broken every single promise.
Thank you. Mark.
Well, I just want to say thank you to League of Women Voters and everybody that put this here together. I just want to say again that my website is www.markleyva.com. I'm, like I said, a constitutional conservative candidate. The establishment is working hard to send mail drops to everybody all the time. But we have a couple good candidates that you're seeing right here, and thank you.
Thank you. Martin.
As Republicans, we are very similar in our policies. Just to point out some differences, I do work for IBM, so I do have a technical background. From a formal education, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Finance from DePaul University and a Master's of Business Administration from Purdue University Northwest. Also, as Ben had said, I entered this race because I love the United States. And the United States is built on capitalism, and I'm stopping. So. www.votelucas.com.
Now I'm feeling left out. www.ben-ruiz.com. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all, and that will do it for tonight's debate.